So hello and welcome everybody. I'm delighted to be here for today's webinar, part of the DT Lab Transformation at UCC. Today we're on our second series of digital wellness, the future of work, connecting buildings, people and nature, as a follow-up from our successful July event. And what a beautiful day to be starting with October the 1st, autumn and sunshine down here in West Cork, wherever you're dialing in from. I know we've lots of participants dialing in from all over, so it's great to welcome you. My name is Gráinne Bagnall and I'm co-founder of the Digital Lab together with Dr. Paddy O'Reilly, Tony Maroney, Antonio Santos, Dara Reardon and AJ McCarthy. It's wonderful to have these events broadcasted and we'll record and go live to you later. Without further ado, let me introduce our fabulous panel for today. And we're just going to go around the clock. Each panelist is going to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll come back to them giving a short story as to what their connection with people, buildings and natures is all about, and why they were so happy to accept our invitation to share their knowledge and their passion and their professional background in this space. So it's a very unscripted event. We haven't thrown out any questions, but we do certainly invite our participants to add in our chat box if you have a question or a comment you'd like to pose to any of our panelists, or indeed to myself. Please do so, and we'll get to those questions throughout the next hour. Thank you and good afternoon. So I'm going to invite Annalisa to start with the intro. With that fabulous nature background, you're all set.
all set in the middle of the nature environment. So thanks for the invite. My name is Annalisa Setti. I'm a lecturer in applied psychology in UCC. My background is cognitive science. And I suppose I come from the perspective of being interested in the human mind, but everything that makes the human mind better, starting from, our body, exercise, the environment, nature. So not as much seeing our mind as just the brain, but the brain in an extended and an embodied sense. So that's me.
Looking forward to hearing lots about that later, Annalisa. Thank you. If we move along to Lorna.
Good afternoon. I think yes, it is. Okay, so it's good afternoon. I am Lorna Ross and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer with BHI Health and Wellbeing, which is the kind of clinical part of the organization. And I'm here really, I guess, early in my kind of journey into the kind of nature and work. And the perspective I hope to share today is to really think about it. I've worked at the intersection of kind of humans and machines and from a design perspective for about 30 years. And I think the timing of this conversation is so important, and I'm hoping to kind of reflect on where we've kind of ended up in our relationship with technology and why there's this kind of urgent need for us to kind of really reconsider. And I think and Annalisa mentioned this disembodied. I think that technology has done that, and to try and retrieve that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of humans and tech in my section.
Great, Lorna. Thank you for that. Martin, good afternoon. Yeah, you're not too far away from us, but great to have overseas channels dialing in with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the invitation, Gráinne. It's a real delight to join you. And I'm joining you from the wonderful Forest of Bowland, which is in Lancashire in the UK, so that's northwest England. It's been a stormy day, but it's nice and sunny now, so that bodes well. My passion is around regenerative futures, and the approach we're taking to sustainability is probably not enough at the moment. We need to do far much more. And when you think about the causes of our problems today, it's because of our disconnect with nature. And people, that general disconnection with nature. So very much involved in the built environment. I support a good number of organizations, be they clients, contractors, architects, academic bodies, just helping them on the regenerative future, trying to get them to think what we can do better for the planet and better for us as human beings. So it's a real delight to be here, and I'll be sharing some of my insights on people connecting with nature in a few moments. Thank you.
Fabulous, Martin. Thanks. And I know I've had the pleasure of joining some of your webinars throughout the summer since we've been in contact, and really your global and international spectrum on it, I think, will be a great insight to our panelists today. And it's great to have, you know, so sometimes we think we're all jaded from Zoom, but great to have such insights coming from us, for not just local and not from those, you know, blown in like myself, leading me nicely into Roisin. When I met Roisin not so long ago on the UCC campus, I said, wow, a graduate from UCD, and now here we are talking about nature, people and buildings on UCC. And she's moved down to Cork and loving it and doing some amazing work with our councils and buildings. And it was a delight to actually meet face to face and have Roisin join us on this conversation. So over to you, Roisin.
Hey, and thanks so much, Grania. It was great to meet you on campus there. Yeah, so I'm a nature-based landscape architect, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what nature-based is. I really do agree that our environments shape our thinking, and we should, it's interesting to think how we can shape our environments as well. It's a two-way dialogue, and how connecting to nature and I suppose our choices and our actions, they affect, you know, what our capacity to act, what we feel our capacity to act is while we're in this moment of climate and biodiversity and planetary and food systems health, and we're looking at that. So I work with the EU project Connecting Nature, and they're all about nature-based enterprises as well. I'll talk to you about that. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Lovely, Roisin, thank you. And what a wide spectrum of guests. I suppose it's hard when the guys at DT Lab challenged me that to bring together a collective of people that I know through, be it my professional practice or my personal practice, and to know that people are really, you know, engaged in nature. And what does that all mean? And you know, with Annalisa representing, you know, and working with UCC, it's great to be on site. And I worked with Annalisa during my course of design thinking, innovation through design thinking. Just last year, I became a graduate of it. And I was letting her know that I was doing virtual sites of forest bathing. And she was like, wow, Grania, can I join? And I said, well, the only thing is it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And she was like, wow, that's a bit early for me. But, you know, this is it. This is how we make conversation. This is how we try and get engaged, be it virtually or in person. And now that we're coming out, we see lots of forums, lots of companies, institutes, universities all over trying to find what is the future of work, what is the balance. And I think from our guest speakers today, I hope we will be leaving our participants with some golden nuggets of insights that you can incorporate, be it you've come here today just to find out a little bit more. Some of the words caught you in the description, like biophilic design, design thinking, cognitive behavior. You know, what are these all about and how do they connect to you individually? Well, hopefully after our panelists' presentations, you'll have a really beautiful overview of what that is, and then you'll come back to us. And I've asked the panelists that maybe this could be a Netflix series and this could be episode 1 and we could join for 2 or 3, who knows, but participation from you guys would be great as we launch into a couple of minutes of each panelist sharing with them their thoughts on this subject. And if you have questions, you might engage in the chat box or you might hold them for later, whatever suits you. So it was kind of a spin the bottle. Who should we start with? It was a hard decision for me to decide. But I'm going to, as he's the only man for a change on the conversation, and delighted to be with all us ladies. Martin, I'm going to give the floor to you, and hopefully without a technology glitch, I can share your screen if this works for me. And if not, I'm sure you'll be able to do without, because we had some technical small mishaps coming onto the call today. So that doesn't look to be working for me straight away, Martin, but I'll ask you to dive in and start.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll work on your slide. Thank you.
Yeah, keep trying, going there, because there weren't two quotes in there which I wanted to bring to people. Actually, between the showers this morning, I sat under our beech tree just to bring some thoughts together for this session. And I thought of a comment you made a few weeks ago about you doing your forest bathing under a beech tree. So there was a good connection there. But yeah, where to start with connectivity with nature? And I think probably, what's uppermost in our minds is the pandemic and the lockdown we've just come through. And when we were really in the lockdown, we sought nature. We had an hour's exercise. And in that hour's exercise, we got out, we went to parks, we went to forests, we went locally, but we really sought out nature. And that gave us a preview of what the world could look like. We were in awe at the sunsets. We liked the silence. There was no noise from traffic. We could hear bird sound. We were in wonder at deer wandering into our cities. As I say, that just gave us a little glimpse of what the world could be like. And one of the quotes I put on the slide, if you can get that up, was from John Muir way back in 1877, that when we go for a walk in nature, we receive more than we seek. It's very unusual that when we do go for a walk and we notice nature, that we feel dissatisfied. We always feel satisfied. Also around the pandemic, Arundhati Roy, writing in the Financial Times, talked about the pandemic as being a portal, which we'll pass through. We're passing through that portal now. We have to decide whether we're going to take all the bad stuff with us, or we leave all that behind and take really what we want through. And now we're passing through that portal. I think we're going back to the old normal. We talk about the new normal, but it's so easy to drift back to where we were before. And we're losing that sense of wonder that we had at the beginning of the lockdown, of what we could do. And we're now in that sort of sense of uncertainty. We've got that balance, that hybrid. Are we working from home? Are we working in the office? And we're picking a bit of an angst and anxiety about traveling to and from. We're not sure whether we want to travel on public transport in our cars. And bring all these together, and we've got COP26 coming up around the climate change. Probably the three key crises we're facing at the moment: the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, and then the sort of mental health and anxiety crisis. What connects all those together is actually our connectivity with nature, and our relationship with nature is the source of all this. One of the quotes I put on that slide growing up was what I see is that my grounding in biophilia. Just a chap called Eric Fromm, who back in 1968 was probably the first person to use the expression biophilia, and he took that as being love of life and love of everything that's living. But he also saw it as an antidote to being helplessness and disorientation, and really was a means of hope, connecting with nature for hope. And I think that really resonates with where we are today, with the climate, with the ecology, mental health, and all the issues we're facing. So that's very pertinent. So I think one of the questions is, how do we bring that into our buildings? How do we bring that into our workplace? How do we bring the all that real nice sensations we get when we're in nature? The feel we get when we get caught in a summer storm, when we're looking at the sky and the starlight, which is why I put the title on the slide, if we get to see that, of storms and starlight. The idea being that nature is not all cuddly. It is beautiful in its own way, but it's not all friendly and cuddly. And whilst we have storms, we also have the starlight, and we need to bring all that together. It's back in 2016, 2017 when I wrote Future Restorative, and I spent a lot of time researching biophilia. And what struck me from that research was that biophilia is really a secret source for sustainability, for sustainable behavior. So if we can reconnect with nature, if we can really get biophilia into our workplaces, then people will have a better approach, a better understanding, a better relationship with nature, and take care of the planet and take care of sustainability issues, etc. And that sort of resonated with Stephen Kellett, who was one of the founders of biophilic design, who saw that as being about not so much as the plant in the corner. Sorry, I must mention the plant in the corner, but more about our values and our ethical responsibility to nature and to the world. And then when we look at our buildings, we're spending 90% of our time within buildings. We can throw other quotes and pieces of research in. Spend 90% of our time in buildings. We only, I think 19-20% of us actually spend time in nature in a meaningful way of going into nature, rather than just going for a walk. And we spend far much time, 90% of our time in buildings. The remainder 10% is in our cars or on public transport, so we're still contained and maybe isolated. And when we think of building design and we think of city design, there's big talk about smart buildings and smart cities and digital cities, digital buildings, which is brilliant. Very rarely, though, do we hear the expressions of Internet of nature. We hear of Internet of things, but we rarely hear about the Internet of nature, and how by engaging with nature, we can really improve the way we're doing things within our buildings. It's a real powerful force for the future of life and future of work. Many people may be familiar with Thoreau's work back in the 1850s, I believe it was, on Warden Pond, where he purposely went into the forest, went into nature, lived in a cabin on Warden Pond, I think for 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, or whatever it was, just to isolate himself, to live with nature for that period, to see if it was possible. But he did that largely to escape from the stress of life at the time. I wonder what he would have thought of the stress of life in 1850 compared to now. It's interesting. So I'd just like to finish by mentioning warden zones. Yeah, the place we go to be quiet, place we go to be grounded, which is often in nature. And it's a place we can go to be mindful, and to be present, to be in the moment. And I'm seeing more of this creeping into office spaces and workplaces. A brilliant example are the construction sites in London that are advising their operatives when they go through an induction of where they can go locally into a green space to have their lunch, where they can go for just 5 minutes to get away from the noise and the stress and the dirt of a construction site, and sit and get themselves back together again. To just be in the moment. So Lorna, you asked us to sort of complete our little thing with a tip or something that we can do, and probably is sort of linked to that warden zone. Where do you go to find that peaceful moment? Where do you go to find a quiet space away from the hustle bustle? And for those who manage buildings or operate buildings, do you provide that for your staff? Do you provide that for the people who live, work, or play in your buildings? I'd love to see far much more of that warden zone within our buildings. I see you've got the slide there. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. It's a great place to finish and hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Absolutely, Martin. I think that was just timing. There you go. I didn't want to connect with you and a beautiful slide for people to take home with them on Martin's tips. Thank you so much for that, Martin.
Pleasure.
And I think it'll have our participants, you know, think about the afternoon of where is that moment for them to get out with, and when they're building or constructing or in that phase, be it for themselves or indeed others, to bear in mind this whole new, which is not new, the biophilic design, but indeed get to grips with it all. So thank you, and I definitely see an episode 2 there with all your sites, and we can share and watch out for our Twitter feeds and our LinkedIn feeds, guys, so we will have all the connections to Martin's details should anyone be interested in following up. So thank you for that. I'm now going to, Roisin had suggested that she found a nice connection with Martin, and therefore her chat would follow nicely. So Roisin, over to you, and hopefully I'll be able to share your slides just now. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Hopefully the slides will work.
Yeah.
They're very visual, and I could nearly start by answering that question with the first slide. Is a picture of a nature reserve where we live and we've created. So I suppose as a landscape architect, you think about how action is this antidote to despair, and we get to create. And what's really nice is co-creating with people spaces for nature. And I think what we see just by letting spaces be for nature to do its own thing, it really gains a vibrancy. And this is the vibrancy I'm always looking for. You want nature to be allowed to do its own thing. So this rose I have here beside me looks very nice, but I'd love if I could get an organic scented rose to have beside me. It's just a matter of vibrancy, right? And so what's interesting about our world right now is we can't really get these things so easily, and we can't be active participants as much as we might like to create this and bring nature into our office environment. And I suppose why I asked to come after Martin was I was absolutely blown away by the idea that we are spending 90% of our time indoors. That's amazing to me, because I suppose I'm outside a lot, and we kind of tend to think everybody's world is like our world. But I thought about it quite deeply, and I think it is true. And cognitively, our environment absolutely affects our ability to create and think and how we feel about ourselves. And I know there's research for that, and it'll be spoken more about here. But what's interesting to me is how we are active participants in this. So I would have worked with communities and on projects, but it would be their outdoor space that they were creating, and looking at how we can activate our space. Like, if we have access to space outside where we can relax and become mindful and become present, you can bet your bottom dollar if people have been involved in creating that space, whether it's in an office environment, they've created a roof garden collaboratively, it's going to mean more to us. So I create processes for that to happen, but I think they should be structures for that to happen in our cities and in our work environments, just that it's easy to do. It's not such a leap to do. So my slides were about how I came to Cork. So I was up in Dublin and worked to create nature reserves, and came down to Cork through that means. I kind of fell in love and stayed in Cork. But this idea of collaboration, co-creation is huge. And then, so also, yeah, that we can create these spaces very close to us in our backyards that are spaces to slow down and be mindful. And I suppose what I was, I often think and advocate for thinking about where our materials come from. So what's the start of their life, how we process them, and to bring them to our space, whether it's in an office space or an outdoor environment. And a big thing for me is it organic? Has it been just cared for in that way? How easy is it for us to get these kind of materials and bring them into our office and bring them into our outdoor spaces? How do we care for those people who do this, and create? They often spend double the time looking after materials, and what we're finding is that we're not compensating, we're not paying for the ecosystem services that they provide. And if you think about it, someone who grows something organically, they are creating this space in nature at source where nature is cared for, and it is coming to us, and we are enjoying the benefits of that, and also the earth is enjoying the benefits of that on multiple layers, and we're not paying for the service, and then they have to ask us for double the price or however much the markup is for their time. We can't pay that, and that's a barrier I'm coming up against as a landscape architect. I'm asking my clients to pay for these higher quality materials that are created with such care, and they can't justify paying it. So can we get some structures in place on a global level to think about GDP in a different way, to value people who create things in a way that cares for nature? I suppose I'm working from Republic of Work in Cork, and there's a lot of plants here. It does seem to conform with biophilic design inside. I moved down here last month, and it's big, wide open space, and it does definitely affect our thinking. So yeah, as an ambassador for Connecting Nature, we developed our platform to share resource on for people who are nature-based enterprises, which means they have nature at their core and would supply materials like beautifully made chairs. There's beehives that are really safe that you can look at so all these different types of materials and consultants are there on that platform, and it's really open for more people to join and become part of this global community. Yeah, so then my last slide was just to say again, as a takeaway, every act for nature, I think, counts, and it does tend to build up in us. Like, we start by planting, maybe just acorn season now, so planting trees, little acorns, they grow into something, and someone will take it somewhere and it might become a big tree. But anything we can do for nature, it all kind of tends to build up, and to bring that into our workspace, it's going to uplift not just us, but the people around us. And so I also can start a conversation for advocating for change. So, and that's it. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Fabulous, Roisin. Thanks so much. So much to cover in a short snippet of time. Your advocacy, your architecture, the interesting nuggets of, educating people on how to source better, and then yet seeing the euro sign or the dollar sign, or we're back to the pound signs now, as Martin would say. How do we educate them to do better, yet have the restriction at the other end that sources are not available? In Ireland, I'm sure to many that have been listening to the news or trying not to listen to the news, we've a big catastrophe on building blocks. Who would have thought it? Who would have thought these blocks are making houses crumble? And yet we're calling out. So I think the time for change couldn't be more now, Roisin. And it's so brilliant that we have local people that we are often called as blow-ins, but I think when we get settled or rooted, like the lovely acorn, I think both of us arrived in Cork not thinking, we would blossom and do so well and be out in nature and find our sense of belonging. And I think a sense of belonging for us all is what nature is about. And people argue, you know, we are, you know, at one with nature. And when we can bring it into our offices or our outdoors, when we can source better, so much to take away in the local beehives and city beehives, and the work that UCC is doing with their green campus and beehives. It's all around us, but we got to take time to notice and be aware of our senses, and, you know, take the time to conversate and discuss. And I'm delighted to be on this platform today to indeed bring you together and have this time to discuss in our busy lives what it's like to be in nature. Lorna, no hard act to follow. I know you sent me beautiful slides, so all going well. Part 3 will work, and then Annalisa will come in. But I have the screen ready with.
Yeah, I can try and share my own slides.
Yeah, do you want to do that, Lorna?
Yeah, because I think that might be what's going on. It
Great.
says host has disabled participants. Can you enable screen sharing? And then I can share.
So that should be it now. And does that work for you?
Yeah, hang on. Let me see. Yeah, let me try and do this.
Taking technology in our own hands. No better lady. No better lady. Yeah.
No, can you guys see that? Can anyone see anything coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm just going to go full screen. Sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect, Lorna. Thank you.
Great. I feel like I have the advantage. I can hide behind the slides. I'm really sorry. My other Martin and Roisin did a great job. So I'm just going to actually also going to start my timer because I'm horrible. I know I'm a terrible perception of time. So I'm really new. I guess I've just moved to Sligo from Cork, so I don't know what that says about everything that's just been said about Cork. But so hello from the west of Ireland. I'm living it up here. So I'm really new to, I guess, my kind of Gráinne and I've been talking a little bit, and I'm really interested to kind of share less about any kind of ideas around solutions. I think, you know, the other panelists have lots of amazing work done in this space, but I feel like there's definitely an imperative that I understand about why the timing is so important. So I'm going to try and touch on that. And so this is really, you know, an example of my two worlds. I've worked in design for 30 years, and it's really been two different kind of dialogues between tech and humans. And, you know, from a design perspective, you know, an awful lot of, I work in innovation, an awful lot of innovation that I've designed is really about kind of really driving, you know, technology into people's lives, hopefully in a positive way, but also understanding, you know, human behavior. And that's a big part of design as well. And so I think this intersecting of the kind of human and machine has been probably a kind of enduring theme in what I've done for about 30 years. I'm really interested in this idea that we shape our tools and then they shape us. And, you know, again, I'm not an anthropologist, I wish I were, but I know enough to be dangerous about design is really about, you know, we build things and then we choose to outsource. And we're really shaped by our tools. I mean, we shape them and we have a plan in mind, and we are often very aspirational, and it's very much about the future, maybe getting better. And certainly it's about change. So tools embody the idea of change. And, you know, the picture on the right is probably something we're all not even familiar with, guilty of, I would say. And that idea that, you know, tools and devices in particular then shape our behaviors, and not just as individuals, but as as communities. I think there's a real kind of inflection point, and I know that's an overused term, but you know, the way we change is changing. And an awful lot of our digital tools, I mean, sometimes our tools historically have been mechanical tools, and they've allowed us to kind of outsource physical activity, often considered to be, you know, kind of tedious or kind of dangerous. But we're changing from the inside. You know, I think the digital tools we're using are changing us from the inside. There's this term servant tool versus comrade tool. And historically, an awful lot of our tools that we outsource things to were that we outsource things that we didn't necessarily want to do, or we didn't value as activity, or we had decreasing kind of social currency. And so we allowed our tools to do that for us. More and more, we've kind of built tools that really rival us in terms of they're very similar to us. I think what's interesting is you think about things like AI and machine learning. I mean, our tools have never been more like us. And so even though there's this kind of sense that they're really alien, they actually are modeled very much in how we think and how we see the world. And I think there's this intimacy in what we've created that is really interesting. You know, for generations, we've taught people how to understand technology. We've all been through that. I don't know how many of you have got, like, you know, kind of Windows for Dummies type, you know, big old files of books and stuff. We all learned because tools were built and we had to understand how to use them. And that was kind of considered that was considered the proposition is you know, they get built and then we teach people how to use them. And moving forward with this intelligence, our tools are going to basically understand us. There's an awful lot of anxiety around tech, you know, particularly tech in the home. And when I was with Accenture, the doc, we did a very large study of tech in the home and really seeing this migration from people being suspicious about technology turning up in their home in domestic spaces. And that kind of sentiment shifted quite quickly into people feeling guilty about the degree to which, you know, there was this ambient tech and how much it had kind of had infiltrated, and particularly around you know, childhood and the home and the domestic space and the role of technology. The era of mass distraction, I think this is something we have to acknowledge is, you know, this idea that the pursuit of happiness can be hard, you know, and I mean, people know this, it's a work, it's a journey, you know, people go on journeys, you know, I've gone to yoga retreats, I've done meditation, you know, we've all bought the books, we've all, you know, we're making these journeys towards believing that there is a journey to be made towards happiness. But it's hard and it takes work, and the pursuit of distraction is really, really not that terribly hard. And so, you know, people understanding they ultimately want to feel happy and content often can be manipulated into the things that are actually just distractions versus solutions. The impact of impatience, you know, is really interesting working for me in tech. Is there's kind of human speed and there's machine speed, and this idea of the kind of just in time and frictionless and an awful lot of what's happening around us in terms of the kind of immediacy of stuff. Humans were basically, without maybe being kind of actively or kind of consciously aware of this, we've really accelerated the nature of how we live, the speed we live at, and we're living at a machine speed now. Human cognitive atrophy. I can never say the word atrophy. It's probably something I should put another word in there. But this is the idea of what are we outsourcing? And there's conversations about, you know, pros and cons to. Sometimes it's good to let our devices do things, but then we also become less skilled ourselves. We have less internal capabilities, and there is a concern around the things that as you continue to outsource them and you don't practice them, you know, they really degrade as capabilities. We have people making tools to the jobs they used to do. This is a lot around automation. There's a huge conversation around automation. Again, you know, in terms of intelligent machines and manufacturing, and the idea that, you know, do we diminish the value of the kind of the kind of labor of humans in terms of having them building the machines to then have the kind of higher order activities? This is a great quote from Kevin Kelly, who was the founder of Wired magazine. He said, "We're morphing so fast. Our ability to invent new things far outweighs our pace to civilize." And I love the word civilize because I don't fully understand what it means to civilize a tool. And I think, Deirdre, that's the 2.0 conversation for me, is what does it mean to civilize your tools? You know, I've worked in innovation for my whole career, and I think there's some really interesting, people often think innovation is inherently, you know, a positive thing to work in. It's kind of, and I think there's a lot of toxic innovation and design for addiction and for planned obsolescence. And I'm really grateful to see some of the stuff happening around the right to repair movement in terms of, you know, kind of being able to make devices where there's guidelines and more accountability in how we manufacture and disassemble, and that's really a powerful direction we're heading in. Digital detox, a lot of people kind of talking about the kind of need to kind of be able to detox from tools. And if you think about an industry like tech, if 1 in 5 people report actively trying to limit their digital consumption, 7 out of 10 are digitally dieting. So again, we clearly have a conflicting tension with the devices that we have such an intimate relationship with, and the degree to which they've shaped our behaviors. I'm just going to close on this. I think, you know, I've worked for a lot of different organizations. I think organizations put a lot of energy exploring the future through technology and very little exploring the future through humans. And I think that this is why I'm really interested in this conversation in terms of the kind of retrieving back the idea of kind of humanness and embodiment. I think we have lived a very abstracted, embodied life, you know, through our tools. We need to consider, I think, moving forward, what's most important questions of our time, not questions about technology at all, but the questions about ourselves. And this is just my last one. I won't go into too much detail, but I'm finding it really compelling, you know, from my current role in healthcare, is to really think about, you know, the kind of this idea of mind-body connection. And we've been looking at a lot of kind of things like placebo and the degree to which there is a way of actually kind of healing yourself. And there's an awful lot, you know, again, movement in the brain and creativity, and the importance of, you know, kind of movement as medicine, and, you know, food as medicine, an awful lot of things. But I think movement and our ability to be optimistic and our ability to think creatively, and then just, you know, human health is clearly linked to planet health, you know, as we've seen in the last 18 months, and our vulnerability. And so I'm just really excited that this conversation, Deirdre has been triggering this conversation, because, you know, for me, the timing is really key. Thanks. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Lorna. My goodness. You know, power to a lady in tech that has so much screens. And I think each and every one of your slides could nearly stop and have a full-blown conversation about it. You know, I'm sure if, you know, the civilized tools, you know, and robots replacing peoples on factory lines. You talked about the right to repair, and are we repairing enough? You covered digital dieting, and is that the new form of disconnecting to reconnect? And then plant-based medicines, and we've just, you know, a really big storm for UCC at the moment is the Arboretum and the phenomenal trees planted back in 1835, and the wonderful chemicals that they're exuding to give us great plant-based prescriptions to help our next generations. So, you know, wrapping that all up in 10 minutes, Lorna, you did a great job. Thank you so much. And, you know, I think Martin is beaten to you to episode 2, episode 3. These might be one-off Netflix. How do we, and I suppose the beauty of it is really a live event, which we're most excited about in the new year, that we start the conversation, but we don't let it go. And that's my promise to both my panelists and to the DT Lab, and indeed our community that we're growing. How can we shape together a better future going forward for our children, for those, as somebody had mentioned there on the chat box, you know, the child lying with the screen at night? Is that for many of our children the future, or how do we intercede that with what's coming down the line? And Annalisa, I know you have, I've often caught you on school runs, and so I know that picture of the child lying in bed was definitely sparked your idea to go, gosh, Lorna's boy is well grown up to it, and I know he doesn't go to bed at night. Now that they've moved to Sligo, there's so much going on. You're on mute, Lorna.
Yeah, no, he's like a wild man in the woods. I think he always was there.
Which is
I don't know what he gets up to at night. When you're 15, you don't tell your mother anything.
So this is a really nice point. I can see why Annalisa wanted to follow Lorna. I mean, no hard act to follow, girl, but I'm sure, did you manage to be able to share your slides? You had a couple.
I can try.
Yeah,
I can
great.
certainly try and see what happens. Yeah, can you
Fabulous.
see?
Look, this is,
I mean, it's nothing new, at least for some. I'm sure you're quite familiar with that picture.
Absolutely. And I would say for some of our colleagues that are probably tuning in from UCC, that's exactly how it looks today. The sun is shining.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. So what a beautiful slide to open with.
So I wanted to, or, you know, a desire to follow Lorna, because when we had our pre-chat, she mentioned embodied cognition and this idea again of tools as part of our of the way we think, the way we act in the world, and how much our body is important and how we use tools. So I thought I really like, you know, my theoretical framework, if you want to call it that way, is embodied and extended cognition. So it really, I really like the idea that people outside academia that work in what we call the real life are, you know, are embracing this idea and bringing it forward. So yeah, so I work in UCC, not exactly in that particular place. I don't teach on the grass in front of the main quad, although, maybe, Roisin can have some architectural ideas to make that happen. So I thought my take, I suppose, as a teacher, as a researcher, and as a person that works in this institution, is thinking that when we walk into a workplace, really we walk not just into a building or a campus, but into a mindset, into a way of seeing things, into a way of thinking about things, and into a culture. And so I suppose you see as a culture of sustainability that precedes me, and you mentioned Green Campus, and all the work that has been done on that. And I suppose it is one of the things that I think is important to understand very much in depth, how much the place and what the place suggests in terms of culture, in terms of way of thinking, is foundational for a relationship between an employee and the workplace, or a student and the place where they study. So, and I think that has an impact, going back to cognition, on our thinking and our academic performance, or performance as workers. So so starting from that, as I said, in UCC we have interesting features. So this is, for example, the community gardens, and which I haven't visited yet, but it's an initiative led by students, where both students and staff can go and do gardening and be in contact with nature. And I think beyond this particular instance, this is again an example of how we can foster a culture of biophilia, as Martin would say, and a culture of nature contact, and nature being part of our daily experience of our workplace, which again shapes and contributes in shaping our cognition, in shaping the way we think, our, what we call cognitive restoration, our sense of well-being. And the fact that we can move around, that we can, have a physical, a physical appraisal of the environment, a physical interaction. We're not just, technological beings in Zoom sitting down all the time. And that kind of made me to think that it would be interesting to talk here about a collaboration that through Green Campus I've established with the University of Bologna, which it happens to be also the place where I studied. And if you look at this picture, it is very different from a campus, from UCC campus or any, Irish, I suppose, university campus. It is urban, it is built, it is historical, and that has, pros and cons. Of course, you're in a busy city. We know that our brain is always looking for novelty, is always looking for stimulation. So, being in this type of environment has positives, but at the same time, you don't have as much access to nature. I remember when I was a student, we were all cramming to the botanic gardens because at the time it was the only place that was available. And that has an influence on the way you approach, your academic life as a student. What are the possibilities offered to you? And so it happened that Bologna is expanding in different campuses, and what they have tried to do is, and maybe offline I will ask Roisin her opinion on this, but what they've tried to do in the new campuses is to embed nature into the campus life. So to provide opportunities to have places to study, like almost being in a study room, but outdoors, having places to chat, having places to relax. And that goes back to what Martin was saying, that they have tried to shape the environment to cater for this different relationship with nature. You know, a place where you can rest, a place where you can be mindful, a place where you can study. So it's not just nature, as you can see in the pictures, but so from that, we started this idea of trying to understand this person-place interaction, and we have devised a survey that will look at the sense of place, and the sense of place in terms of, you know, what do I find on UCC campus and on these new campuses in Bologna, what I need to relax. Do I find a place where I can relax? Do I find a place where I can have a chat? Do I find a place where I can focus? Do I find a place where I can go away from people if I'm hyperstimulated? Because it is also, you know, we often talk about the person-environment interaction like we all people were the same, but we're not the same. And we have different, for example, sensory needs. So some of us are more sensation seeking, they like the buzz, they like the noise. Some of us are more, you know, sensory avoiding, or not just sensory avoiding, but sensory sensitive. So they need quiet places. So what we will look at is in some way to try to capture in a systematic way those relationships through the sense of place, through asking students and potentially staff about their sense of belonging, like Grania mentioned, and the relationship with nature and how much nature plays, and being able to be outdoor, to move around and to avail of different spaces in UCC and in Bologna, how much that then builds up to a satisfying quality of life as a student or as a person. And again, with the idea that that has an impact on our quality of life, our well-being, and our academic performance in at the end of the day. So that's what is ongoing. And in terms of UCC, what we have tried to do is, this is a new initiative, so forgive a small advertisement. So, well, Grania knows it already. But what we're trying to do, this is a module, so Canvas, for those that are not UCC students, is our tool that we use to communicate with students, put up slides and things like that. And what we did, there is an area for students called the Success Zone. And what we tried to do is to gather all the initiatives related with nature and well-being that we have in UCC in this Canvas module that is called Success It's in Your Nature. Bit of a, you know, play word, and we would love to have Grania there at some point. And there is all different initiatives where we emphasize the fact that nature can improve our well-being, that we are biophilic, so we need to develop that and find that in ourselves, and also our pro-environmental behavior, like in a positive cycle between, you know, whereby we feel part of nature. So there are all existing initiatives, walks, you know, different things that people can do, the gardens, the beehives, and you know, like a hub to enhance nature contact, I suppose. So hopefully it will be a useful tool, and hopefully, you know, I think this type of thing is potentially transferable to other contexts. So yeah, that's me.
You're on mute, Grania.
Thanks, Lorna. I'm lost in nature. I can see myself lying down in the grass and the bees are buzzing over me in UCC. And I know we have some fellow students from Bologna, from UCC, and great to see those communities emerging and others. Lots of chat going on, guys. I feel like I'm at the, you know, the drum has to roll and get it all out to you. 2 questions came up of many of the chats. There's feeds coming in. Tig, I know I've connected with Tig up in Maynooth University, and he's doing some great work in Nature for Health. He's shared the links, so I'd ask everybody to check out their chat box and see the various shares that have gone on. I know Dr. Fiona Chambers is sharing her likes with the 5.0, and Lorna, your thoughts there, she will no doubt bring into the classroom and have her students examine the slides. In this millennium, the developments in information and communication technology have a fundamental influence, making and purchasing behavior, both in a generational and cross-generational way. Rarely have the orientation, skills and behavior of a generation influenced previous generations, but also companies, as in the case of the Generation Z and the millennials. Now, that is, you know, that can be a subject in itself. There's papers in it, there's great research. So I've got a couple of moments now to pull it all together and leave you with some of the thoughts of today. Where do we go next? Do we have an episode 2? I have no doubt we have. We have lots of shares and questions. And let me just pop into the Q&A box and see, have we any 30-second answers to these great questions, and who'd like to put up their hand? There are a lot of underused spaces in and around buildings that can be used to bring humans closer to nature. What are the main restrictions to utilize those spaces? Roisin, take it away. Thank you.
I'll do a short answer, but before I set up practice, I worked to look really at how communities can activate these spaces. And I think first of all, if you're a community and you see these spaces, you need to you need high level support. So approach your councillors, approach the city council itself or the town council, and sort of get a pitch together and see who owns the land. There's a whole list of things you can do, but essentially we need to put structures in place so that this happens easily, because there's a lot of steps in a process of it's so worth doing. We see a lot of space that's underutilized for nature and worth going forward. And if you can get a group of even 2 or 3 people and just go for it, try and do it, it's well worth doing.
Fabulous, Roisin. Thanks so much for that.
I would very quickly add to that, Roisin. An example of what we're doing very locally in our local town is just mapping all of that space. And often we're finding the ownership is uncertain, or there's multiple ownership of various bits of it. And often just by asking, people are very willing for someone to come along and just tidy it up, to plant something, to make it look a lot better and get some trees in there or shrubs, or even an orchard. So I think it's, identifying the land, identifying the ownership and just going for it. A bit of guerrilla gardening. Yeah.
I love it, Martin. Welcome to Cork. We're gonna transform some places, and wouldn't that be great to have that as an impact? And Roisin and Martin, I'm sure we could. Lorna, if I was to ask you to wrap in 60 seconds, profound slide, 5.0, a lady of tech moving into this nature space, finding your feet in a new location in Sligo. What's your message home to the audience today?
I think, I've worked in what's called human-centered design a long time, and there's aspects of planet-centric design, which again, it could be a bit of a spin, a bit of a greenwashing. And I think, acknowledging that there was something I read recently about kind of being more rather than having more. So there's all these kind of buzzwords in terms of balance, like it feels like we're, understanding, and I think accountability, like understanding individual choices. And I know the whole kind of climate change conversation can be so overwhelming, and it's kind of a narrative that is happening at a certain level. But I think grassroots is really important, and I think this is why this community is so great. And an awful lot of, I know there's a principle in innovation that's really nice, and I discovered this when I was working at Mayo Clinic, is that that kind of innovation is often additive, where you keep making more stuff and you kind of become part of the complexity and the problem, because you're constantly generating more, more, I guess, stuff. And kind of subtractive innovation is powerful. You can just stop doing things. And I think there's a aspect of just the empoweringness of stopping things. Like, people are always looking for solutions to be a new thing you do, or a new thing that someone makes, and everyone thinks that tech is a silver bullet. And I think there's something amazingly powerful about some of the things that you can choose to stop. And I think that everyone has that and it's but I think the grassroots thing is terribly important, and really localizing activity.
Absolutely, Lorna. So much takeaways in that. And Annalisa, I know you've given us some takeaways, but do you want to leave our audience with some great research paper or some book you're coming out with soon, and you're going to put all those thoughts into a book for us? How about that?
Well, maybe not now, not in 1 minute. I suppose as a psychologist, my take-home message can be, know yourself in relation to your environment. Just try to understand how you use your technology, how you experience nature, what makes you more attentive, what makes you happier, what makes increase your well-being. And also in the perspective of not just understanding for yourself, but understanding to be part of this positive cycle of being part of nature, because we don't want to be, we use our nature for our well-being and that's it. So that would be my take-home message, I guess.
Fabulous. Roisin, have you got anything to add to that before we wrap it?
Just building on it, like, really, we can consider ourselves active participants and networking together to do that. And I think it's really a truism I've found that one step kind of does lead to another, and we have a lot more power than we think by reaching out to different agencies. It's a decade of action at a UN level, at a European level, at a national and local level, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to keep acting.
Super, Roisin, thanks a lot. And Martin, we gave you the first word. Do you have a last word for us? Other than you can't fly to Cork right now, but we can pick you up from Dublin, bring you over to Sligo and get you to Cork.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful, wonderful. And I just looking at the comments in the chat box and in the Q&A, they're absolutely brilliant. And I'm just thinking they all hint at the disconnection that we have with nature, because we see ourselves apart from nature rather than a part of nature. And there's a word which is coming to mind as reading all these, and that's interbeing. Not necessarily human being, but we're just interbeing. We're part of all of this. And I noticed the last one of the last ones in the chat here from Cloud, sorry. Excellent session. I'm going out into the green and fresh air now. And I think that's what we should all do. Between all these meetings, between one Zoom and the next, just to take 5 minutes outside, feel the air again, and have that mindful moment before we move on to the next session, whatever it may be. But thanks for doing this, Corinne. It's been a great session.
Fabulous. And thank you all so much for your time and preparing your slides and everything for today, and just joining the conversation as I promised. So without a doubt, I definitely see episode two. So I'll give you free access from your mail this weekend, but maybe Monday morning I might attack your diaries again and see what it's looking like before Christmas. On behalf of just a couple of shout outs, on behalf of my colleagues at the DT Lab, you can find us on dtlab.ie, Twitter, LinkedIn, the social platforms. On behalf of CUBS, our business school at UCC, on behalf of the community that we're growing in the Digital Transformation Lab, and thank you all for following us, tuning in. We're going to make a recording available of this to share with your colleagues, and let's grow the community for the next time. And I know UCC are putting on a community week. We've World Mental Health Wellness Day, very passionate day to all of us. On the 10th of October kicks off the community week for UCC and I've been asked to host a virtual forest bathing. So hopefully between 1 and 2, you'll get out and see more of the rich green campus we have at UCC. On behalf of us all, thank you so much. Reaching out to you to embrace nature this weekend, and maybe share with us on Twitter or on LinkedIn more of your conversation and questions that we didn't get around to covering today. Wishing my fellow students at Innovation Through Design Thinking the best for the afternoon, and thanks for all for joining us. Chat soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Grania. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.